So it turns out I do actually have a little bit more yapping to do about the Met Gala. This may end up being long, so you may just want to hold down the fast forward. But not just really about the Met Gala. Something that I want to talk about, and there are a couple points I'm going to make, and they're all going to connect together, so come along for the ride. I have noticed that a lot of people are saying more than ever this year that it feels not just really dystopian, but that it very specifically looks like and evokes sort of the imagery and feeling of what was going on in the Hunger Games. I would just like to say that that is not an accident because Suzanne Collins is an exceptional writer. Very similarly to the way Octavia Butler is an exceptional writer, or was an exceptional writer, and whether it's pattern recognition or the kind of foresight that can come with just looking at things around you, or maybe a potential element of clairvoyance, maybe a mixture of all of that. They both are two examples of writers who really were able to see where America currently was and where it was going. And when I think about Suzanne Collins's depiction of the way fashion and the fashion industry, also the movie and entertainment industries, television, how all of those things played a huge role in the way that the Capitol operated, and how it helped to prop up and keep the, terrible regime running. That is not something that's like invented. She's talking about the US. And I will take a moment to say that if you haven't read the books, you really, really should do that for yourself. It is very much worth it. The movies, I think, are okay. I think they're a good introduction. I frankly do not expect the one of the industries that is essentially heavily implicated as being complicit and part of the structure that allows Panem to exist the way it does. I don't expect that, real world correlation industry to do necessarily a very good job producing a movie about the source material when it's like, wait, is this fucking play about us? So, like, yeah, while I think the movies are okay, I would really say please go read the books, because Suzanne Collins is such a good writer. And a lot of what she drew, some of her early childhood, I think, sort of foundational writing and worldview from is the fact that her father was a Vietnam veteran who instilled a lot upon her about how awful war is. But all that aside, she did a very good job in those books of looking at where America currently was at the time and spelling exactly right out where it was going. And one of the pieces of that being the heavily body mod, facial mod, plastic surgery stuff that was going on with people at the Capitol. Like, we're watching that happen in real time with Mar-a-Lago face. There's only so much, like, facial dysmorphia that the ruling elites can have that kind of enters the mainstream, where people keep modifying, they can't really see themselves anymore. And I'm not even going to make an argument whether it's good or bad with whether people are, end up with cat face or not, like that one character in the Hunger Games, but that's already happening. That's a thing. So when we kind of look at and talk about the ways in which that industry, the fashion industry, is not only an intrinsic part of keeping the machine running, it is also a very intrinsic part of what would ultimately become the rebellion. Thinking about this when people were talking about how La Roche, and I forget the other designer, how some of the best designers and stylists in our industry who have styled some of the best people did such a fucking bad job putting that ugly ass Macy's looking dress on Lauren Sanchez. And I don't think that was an accident. I'm not going to necessarily, prescribe that that is what was going on there, but I do think that, again, whatever, you're working within that system, you're gonna do your job. But I do think that there is an element of rebellion that absolutely can come, not just from places like the fashion industry, but essentially the entire concept of malicious compliance, which is a big piece of fighting fascism, because most of us will not be in the streets or on the front lines. I can barely walk correctly. I can't do that. But if you're somebody who is within the systems that are causing harm, like, malicious compliance is a great way to slow the cogs in the machine down. And so I kind of don't think it was an accident that someone who we know is one of the best stylists of our time did such a fucking bad job, which makes me think a lot about the character of Cinna from the Hunger Games. And obviously, spoiler alert, like if you haven't read the Hunger Games or if you haven't seen the movies, you don't want to know, like don't you shouldn't be watching this video, I guess, but definitely don't watch it now. But when I think about how Cinna used his position within the fashion world and as a stylist, I also think about the fact that Coco Chanel was a Nazi, and that the Nazis heavily used fashion to prop up their system. And so, if there is an industry like the fashion industry in the US that props up the billionaire class, props up this terrible regime we live in, then sort of inherently within that same system is the ability for fashion to act as rebellion and for people to rebel within it. And potentially for people to do sort of malicious compliance type stylings when the wife of the world's most evil billionaire is fucking present. And I can't even, you know what I mean. But I think so much about what Cinna was able to do, not only by using his position in proximity to Katniss and to the capital and everything to get in with the rebellion and do what he needed to do, but the fact that he used fashion to do it, you know, the girl on fire, the dress. I mean, so much of the systems of media and fashion that helped keep Pan Am running the way it did were also what was used to take it down. And I think that's like really beautiful and really powerful. And Cinna was obviously one of my favorite characters. I loved him and I cried. And so, essentially, all this to say, yeah, it's not an accident that you're really getting Hunger Games vibes off of this year, because Suzanne Collins was a really exceptional writer.